Now it's time for a segment we like to call The Left Swing. Ladies and gentlemen, some breaking news for you. The President of the United States owes millions of dollars to the Bank of China, and the loan is coming due soon. Oh, wait a second. No, he doesn't. Today, if you've ever wanted to see the definition of fake news, we're about to show it to you. Politico quietly updates an article after first claiming that President Trump currently owes millions to Bank of China. That was the headline the Daily Caller reporter Shelby Talcott wrote. It's referencing an article from Politico that they, quote, updated, but only after they were caught red-handed for not getting the facts of the story right first time around. Worse, they never admitted it was their fault ever. Bottom line, the property in question that the president has an investment in is not, in fact, financed by the Chinese. It's owned by a completely different U.S.-based firm. Not only did Politico fail to retract the story, they decided what they would do is tweak the headline in an attempt to justify their blatant inaccuracies. So how are the headlines, quote, updated? Well, let's take a look, and you got to see this. The headline of the original article was changed from owed tens of millions of dollars to the Bank of China and conveniently deletes the second half of the headline that says loan is due. Look at those differences. Check that out. You have to see how that is so sleight of hand. You're watching it one moment, you don't see what they just did. And here are the editor's notes that they buried at the very bottom of the article. Check this out. It says, an earlier version of the article reported that President Trump owes tens of millions to the Bank of China stemming from a 2012 real estate deal. Though the Bank of China helped finance a deal, it later sold its interest on the loan. So it appears that President Trump doesn't actually owe those millions.
Well, here to talk about this and more, we bring in Shelby Talcott, who is the writer of the story for the Daily Caller, and Vince Coglianese, editor of the Daily Caller and co-host of WMAL's Morning on the Mall. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for.
All right, Shelby, break this down for me because I have seen a lot of, quote, fake news. This might be right up there with it. Walk us through what exactly happened.
So obviously Politico first reported on Friday that Trump currently owes millions to the Bank of China. After it was determined that he doesn't actually owe millions to the Bank of China, what they first did was they quietly edited the article. They only noted at the top that the article and headline were updated to include comments from the Bank of China and additional reporting. And this additional reporting changed their entire story because Trump does not owe millions to the Bank of China. After that, we wrote that up. And then on Monday, Joe Biden pushed this news that Trump still owes money to the Bank of China. After that happened, Politico was sort of forced to issue an additional editor's note and a correction, like a proper correction to the article.
Yeah, but I don't actually think it's a correction. It's an update. I mean, the bottom line is, and let's just be clear so everyone understands this, there is a building in New York. The president invested in it. He doesn't own it. He invested in it. It's owned by another entity, 70% of the bank. Bank of China apparently helped finance it for 22 days, and that was in 2012, almost 9 years ago. So this isn't like something that happened yesterday with a building that he actually owns. It's an investment that he has about something that occurred almost 9 years ago. None of that actually came out until the updated version of the story, correct?
Correct. And this is a big bungle, to be honest with you.
Oh, I think it's a lot more than a big bungle. And that's why your article in Daily Caller was so important because it really laid this all out.
Well, Vince, some people are asking why didn't they completely change it? Specifically, the headline, they tweaked it, but it's still incorrect. Why can't they just take it down or say, hey, this was completely wrong?
I think that this is a kind of a classic sort of journalistic error in the modern era, which is that they're just so ashamed of it, but in the meantime, they're trying to salvage it because they think that there must be some news value here that we can use as a cudgel against the guy. It's just preposterous. And by the way, these errors always go in the same exact direction. They get way over their skis because they're trying. This is wish fulfillment. They kind of think they see the end of the story. They hope that it's going to be to take down the Trump presidency. Everybody's Woodward and Bernstein. But in the end, that actually causes mistakes, because if you allow your political partisanship or your hope for where a story is supposed to go in your mind to lead you, you're going to screw it up. And your job as a journalist is to deliver news. If you were a cook and you were burning food, nobody would go to your restaurant. If you screw up news stories, you devalue your currency, and nobody could rely on you for the truth.
Well, speaking of the truth, I mean, look, the first rule of journalism is start to check for the sources. So they did. They called Eric Trump. He spent 30 minutes on the phone with them, telling them that this story was false because they hadn't had an interest in this building since 2012. So then he tweets out, article should have read, Trump as businessman had a passive, non-controlling managing interest in an office building which had finance for the Bank of China for less than 22 days in 2012. Shelby, it seems to me that if you were writing a story and going to your editors with something, they would ask you, did you reach out? Can you confirm the facts? And you would say, actually, no, I didn't. And then they wouldn't run it.
Yeah, that's completely right. And Vince can attest to that. But you should always reach out to everybody in the story and include what they say, and take that into account. And it doesn't seem like that was done here.
You know, Vince, I think something that this actually proves is that headlines really do matter. Academic studies showed that 59% of people never even clicked on the actual article on Twitter from major publications. And we see this here, this small people saying O's are owed. It's the headline. Some people are just reading this. How important is it to say, hey, the article might actually say the right thing and be corrected, but the headline is wrong, and that's what people are reading?
Well, your journalistic institution is judged based on the accuracy of everything that you put into the piece, and that includes both the headline and the body of the piece. And I can't tell you how many times Shelby and I see stories that are exactly like this in all sorts of outlets, especially when it comes to President Trump. Just think about how many times we've had banking stories or finance stories about Donald Trump. Remember, they were claiming that he was invested in chloroquine, and that's the only reason he was mentioning it from the White House podium. It was preposterous. He had like 15 cents of exposure to some company that made chloroquine once. It was ridiculous on its face. There were stories about him being connected to Russia through Alpha Bank. That turned out to be a lie. Mainstream media outlets didn't retract, never corrected, never told people that. This happens over and over and over again. And at some point, what's going to happen is, and it already has in many regards, you're going to lose the approval or even the ability to express yourself as a credible journalistic organization to the public at large.
Well, you know, it's interesting because Lindsay asked us a minute ago to you, Vince, why they just didn't take it down or admit that it was wrong. Something, though, unique did happen yesterday that I want to call to your attention, because everybody makes mistakes, and I get it. It happens. But there was an event in the cabinet room with the president and other folks. The pool, which is all these reporters that come in to cover it, the print pool reporter asked the president whether or not he was concerned that South Korea had done more testing, trying to obviously take the president to task for this. Dr. Birx inserted herself and said, actually, that's not true. Your data is wrong. The reporter in question, his name's Hunter Walker from Yahoo News, and he went back, he looked it all up, and he put out a tweet. And the tweet says that he admits that in the Oval Office, he asked about test rates and infection rates compared to South Korea. President Trump and Dr. Birx said I was wrong and that they had done much more tests per capita. Trump said I should apologize. They did not address multiple questions at our higher education. He goes on later to actually admit that he was wrong and he apologized. I give him credit for that because here's someone, again, we make mistakes. He owned up to it. This is in sharp contrast from Politico. And Vince, I don't understand what's wrong with just saying, hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, because it goes to your point. It maintains some level of credibility.
Yeah, it actually expresses that you have some and that you have some shame and that you are interested in the truth. That really is the point, because a partisan hack will figure out a way to spin and dissemble, whereas somebody who's interested in conveying the truth or finding out what's actually going on will apologize. And actually, the Hunter Walker episode reminded me of something from the beginning of your early days in the administration, when a reporter had said that the bust of Martin Luther King had been removed from the Oval Office. This was like the very beginning of the administration. and was compelled to apologize when it was discovered that the bust of MLK was hidden behind a door in the Oval Office because the door was open.
Yeah, I was there, so now I'm going to need a little bit more therapy to get over that whole incident again. But that was actually day one. That was the first thing that we had happen to us. So thank you for taking me back down memory lane. It's always good to have you guys on the show. Thank you for breaking this down. It's such a great example of this fake news that goes on, and I appreciate you guys highlighting it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Coming up, states are beginning to reopen, but were the lockdowns a little too extreme?
We're going to be talking to our company about that. Stick around.